Northern Lights, a look at Minnesota books and writers, is presented by the Minnesota Center for the Book, a program of the Minnesota Humanities Commission, with funding provided by Target Stores and the Elmer L. and Eleanor J. Anderson Foundation.
It was so gratifying to have this grand opening and see so many people come. I think, it was 4,000 people, and people who were connected to our organizations, to the Minnesota Center for Book Arts, the Loft, and Milkweed, but also just the community coming out to see what this building was about.
Beyond our wildest expectations. It's so wonderful to see all these people here. I mean, I can hardly believe how many people have joined in the festivities.
Having the public in makes this building belong to the city. And for 4.5 years it's been in my head, and for 3 years it's been in the heads of the people working on this. And for the last 2 years, since, well, not quite 2 years, 1.5 years since we bought the building and started the fundraising, hundreds of people have gotten involved, and now today thousands. It belongs to our community, and it's just wonderful.
It was exciting to see such a wide representation of the community interested in this building, interested in books, and it was especially heartening to see people coming all the way up here and coming to the less public part of the building in Milkweed editions, and their interest in the press and publishing. So I couldn't be happier. I'm glad people are as excited as I am about being here. So it's been a tremendous day.
I see Open Book as being a catalyst to make more people aware of literature and how important the written word is in our lives, and the art of the book.
That's what this building's all about celebrating the book and celebrating new ideas and new thought and open mind and open book.
It's been so exciting to work on this project for the last couple years, and to have several thousand people come through and actually see us. We're really here. It's actually happening.
I was born in Minneapolis, and those of you with long memories or who are old-timers and who remember how Washington Avenue used to be will know what it means when I tell this story. When I was a boy 40 years ago, and my mother would ask me to clean up my room, there was a euphemism in the household, which was, if you don't clean up your room, or if you don't study, you'll end up on Washington Avenue. Agatha, you gave me your word. Well, she said, I'm taking it back. It's null and void. You can't take your word back after giving it, I said. That's dishonorable. No? Well, unless I missed my guess, I just did. and honor. That's such a guy thing. So he opened his book and wrote out the ticket, but I explained to him as he wrote that I had been in a hurry to get a dog. My dog, and I explained about my wife leaving me. Caffeine still had me in its grip. But he seemed quite unsympathetic and unmoved, and certainly not about to eat the ticket on my behalf.
The project Open Book really started about 4 years ago from a Loft perspective. I'm on the board of the Loft, and we realized we needed permanent space for the Loft, and we were in a facility that was run by the school district, and the school district was interested in getting the Pratt Center back for their own uses, which is understandable. But we couldn't imagine having a 20-year-old literary center, the largest and the oldest, without a home. So we started talking with other organizations in the literature field at the time, which culminated about 2 years ago in the Loft, Milkweed, the largest nonprofit publisher in the area, and Minnesota Center for Book Arts coming together. We got 4 challenge grants or planning grants to review the possibility of creating Open Book. We looked at over 20 facilities. And then in about July of 1998, those 3 organizations came together, made an agreement to create a 4th entity that at the time we called the Minnesota Book and Literary Arts Building.
This started a number of years ago, as I'm sure you've heard, with many of us realizing we needed a literary center in the Twin Cities and that we had the underpinnings. We have these marvelous literary organizations, and it evolved that the Loft and Milkweed and Minnesota Center for Book Arts came together. I had been on the Loft board when we first started talking about this, and I am currently on the Minnesota Center for Book Arts board. And I had been involved with the starting up of Minnesota Center for Book Arts, so I knew that this was a remarkable community for supporting new and innovative ideas.
As a firm, we've been working with 2 of the 3 organizations for about 12 years, actually. We worked with the Loft back in the time that it first occupied the basement of Playwright Center and later in their facility over in Prospect Park. And with MCBA, we were the architects for their first home, the very first place that they occupied on the corner of First Avenue and 3rd Street North. And they, about 4 years ago, started this program together to look at how they might mutually reside in a facility that would allow them some synergistic programming, some more efficient use of space, because there's actually many of their constituencies are the same. Their memberships are similar, their interests are similar, and they both have classes and have an interface with the public that is very sympathetic. So they, along with Milkweed Editions, organized and got some grants to study the feasibility of collaborating on a facility. And after they finished their programming, they invited us, along with other architects, to compete for a commission to do the project. And we were fortunate enough to be hired to do this project with them.
The vision was to provide, for the first time that we know of in the country, and perhaps the world, a real destination for the literary and book arts. In other words, a physical structure where people can come and learn about and experience reading, writing, and the book arts.
About a third of the way into the project, we realized that this was more than just finding permanent space for these 3 nonprofit organizations. It was really about creating a place in the United States that's about literature and book arts. And so we're the first ones that ever have accomplished this goal. I was in New York last week and they said, well, we should have done it here, but only in Minnesota would this likely happen. So we're pretty excited that we pulled it off.
Well, we actually were in discussions with them from the beginning. I think they knew they needed a bookstore in here, they needed an independent bookstore, and it's a place where we belong. So I've been talking to Linda Meyer, among others, from the beginning, and then about 2 years ago, we started serious negotiations and agreed on terms, and we had some input into what the book space was going to look like, but it's come out beyond my wildest expectations. It's an absolutely stunning place, both the building and the bookstore.
And as you know, the Loft began in the lofty attic of a wonderful bookstore here in town. And that's where literature has often had to find its home, in the basement, in the attic, or in a coffee house. This is a wonderful occasion to be in a building that actually is meant to house literature in all shapes and forms, from the Center for Book Arts to the Loft to Milkweed Editions. This is a home for literature, and it's its own home. It doesn't have to sneak in, and it isn't in the basement. This is a home for literature, and I'm just really excited to be here.
When Minnesota Center for Book Arts decided to join the collaboration along with with the Milkweed Editions and Loft, we saw that this space would allow us to be more of a community. And I think this space in Open Book is so welcoming and comfortable for people to come in and have a cup of coffee, look at books, visit the gallery, maybe take a class either at the Loft or at MCBA. I just think it will be a gathering place for people who love books.
So once we found this site, the challenge really became where to position each organization and how to best use the idiosyncratic spaces. You can see that this floor has a very generous floor-to-ceiling height, as a good turn-of-the-century building often has. And so we were able to create dramatic gallery presentation spaces, orientation spaces. It's from this first floor that you can really see the stair and access to the upper level. And it was at that time that we also imagined wanting to bring in components like a coffee shop and a coffee gallery and a bookstore and a larger performance space, so that the shared life together as the organizations could be rich and dynamic.
We feel at home, and just feel very graced to be able to be in a building of this great beauty, just in the physical beauty of the building, but also already in the very early stages, the ferment that you feel with all of the organizations and the kinds of people that come in here.
A couple of things that we're most pleased with the project about are the ways in which we've been able to embrace some really sort of, well, I guess the best way to describe it is conventionally uneventful and unspecial qualities. By reframing them in the design, in the new design, they become quite remarkable and special. Behind me, for example, up here, is the trace of an old stair. And the temptation was to yank the stair out and clean the space, scrub it clean so that the new function could take over. But in so many ways, both the art form of the book and literature in general, I think, is very much interested in making uncommon things, familiar things, special.
Every day I notice something new about the space. I love the light. I love the way in which we have stairways that go nowhere. One of the writers today said to me, like weeks and weeks of writing sometimes don't go anywhere.
I'd love to live here. Like a lot of people, I think, just listening to the reactions of people today, they echo my thoughts. It is a very accessible building. It's an interesting building. Every room has something that makes you go, I wonder, what a clever idea, or why did they do that?
And you can see, for example, on these columns, earlier versions of the use of the decorum in the space, the sort of funny colored greens that we don't use anymore, and some silver, and they are very, I think, compatible with some of the exceptional artwork that's placed right next to them. And so it is this sense of condensed time and recycled buildings that we think is very sympathetic to the life of these art forms and to that comfortable and interesting quality that the buildings hold.
One of the things that I find fascinating about the building is the ability to keep the old and all of the stories, the wallpapers, the fragments of stairway, the floor that you can see has been obviously worn by previous tenants, and the many metaphors for the book. Many of the just details in each room really speak to book and literary tradition.
Of course, the architect talks all the time about this as being a building that is full of stories and keeps revealing stories. Every time you look at a new piece of it, you see an old story revealed, but at the same time we'll be writing our own new stories, and so will the members of the community who come here.
I think it is that kind of building that we've created, that it can be a place for people to convene. It can also be a very comfortable place for somebody to sit and enjoy what the building's all about, a good book.
Actually, my favorite parts, I don't have one favorite part. I have three favorite parts. One of them is the central stair, which was a collaboration with an artist, Karen Worth. The stair is a marriage of architecture and the book as a structure. And the stairs have a set of pages that leaf out around the exterior, and the interior steelwork is like stitching, like a binding of a book. And so to discover in the use of the stair the properties of the idea of the book and the ways in which architecture and book can fuse and play together. But the second is discovery. You'll see in the two light wells and light atria that are upstairs that come down into the literary commons. We uncovered elements of the history of the buildings, which are really very special. And then one little detail, which an associate of mine has preciously preserved. It's in one of the classrooms on the second floor, where there was a particularly beautiful set of layers of wallpaper, 3 layers of it, together. And we just kept a nice rectilinear frame of plasterwork around it, which she had marked out, we had preserved and protected.
One of the things we thought a lot about when we structured this building was that none of these organizations is in the business of running a building. That's not what they're here for, and we wanted to make sure they were healthier organizations after this project than before.
Well, I was lucky enough to get involved even before there was a building, and helped with the planning and how we would have enough money to pay for it.
The day we actually closed on the building, we were just starting the campaign, which is unusual. Most campaigns are started long before the building starts. So we did things in reverse and rush order.
I think the greatest pleasure for me, though, is the volunteer commitment has grown from a love of the book itself and a love of the reading, literacy, and other programs that make up the essence of the group's work.
And we were hired by Open Book to help them commission artist projects for the new building. And they got money from Jerome Foundation, and we helped facilitate their finding artists who wanted to do projects that would be integrated into the building. And one of them is this collection box by Dean Lucker, and he decided they needed a sculpture that would help collect donations. And so if you take your quarter and put it in there, it animates the figure and the leaves, and it gives you a quote for the day. And if you don't like that quote, you can put another quarter in. And this is a way to raise money for Open Book, but it was also the artists showing possibilities of kinetic sculpture that are activated by coin. And so the artists were sensitized to the mission of Open Book, and they came up with a bunch of great projects that really add to and enhance the experience of Open Book.
Well, despite the fact that the Loft is this nation's largest independent literary center, for many Minnesotans it's been a well-kept secret. Finally, to have a building and be visible and have people driving by, thousands of them, and many people in here today, I think we will not be such a well-kept secret before. And so a lot of new programming will evolve depending upon the people who come to us.
Today we're recruiting new members for the Loft Literary Center. We're the nation's largest independent literary arts organization, and our members take courses in writing, reading, creative nonfiction, poetry, prose. We're for writers at all levels of development, as well as readers. We have services like writers' studios, a book club room for readers. We also have a monthly magazine on writing and reading.
We're going to be able to expand our education offerings and our program offerings. We won't be confined to Friday, Saturday night spaces anymore, and can do a lot of daytime classes that we weren't able to offer before. and maybe do some late night programming. So
part of today's festivities are about our classes at the Loft. We've had Loft teachers talking about classes, we've had mini workshops, we've had a reading group from our Homeschoolers Right Here program. We have registration for our summer term with a special discount today, and it's been a real festive day.
Welcome to the Writer Studios at Open Book. These are a project of the Loft, and they're specifically for writers. This wall, I want you to see, this wall is entirely made of doors that were salvaged from the building. We have 7 studios here, so come on in and take a look at how nice they are. There's a space for you to sit and write. There's a beautiful table. Each one of these 7 tables is made from a different Wisconsin hardwood. And then there's also a chair for you to sit, rest, think, write, read, dream. Some people like to use a laptop on a seat like this, so we wanted to have a kind of different space for them. And then there's a window from which you can see the beautiful skyline of Minneapolis. So these are the Writer Studios. We're really happy about them, and we're looking forward to a time when they're filled with writers who are creating great work here.
It's a wonderful show. It's on KFAI. There is no other show like it in the country from what we hear from the visiting writers in terms of being an hour-long program about visiting writers and also local writers. People come in and read from their own works. They're interviewed, and we play spoken word recordings, and it's pretty hip.
It's on at 11 o'clock on Thursdays, every Thursday from 11 to noon. We do interviews with writers. We also have a couple of regular features, a calendar of what's happening in town, what literary events are happening in town, and also a listing of grants and contests and opportunities for writers.
In some ways, you need to see what book art is. You know, we can describe it in words, but to see the printing presses, the paper making studios, the bindery, with lots of activity, you go, oh, well, that's what book art is. And we're now in the exhibition gallery of the Center for Book Arts, and you can see the diversity of the finely bound book with leather bindings, fine letterpress printing, and you can also see some objects that you might say, well, is that a book? And yes, it is at least book art. And so I think to introduce a broader public to the Minnesota Center for Book Arts is really what we wanted when we moved to this building, and today I think really encourages and probably confirms that that's going to happen.
As you can see, we're still getting everything moved in. It's been quite an undertaking. And in this room, for example, there's 400 cases of type, which we packed for shipping at the other end, and we're now unpacking. Each of these cases contains the full English alphabet, plus the letters and numbers. And we set type out of these cases. This is the way that printed material was produced pretty much from the time of Gutenberg up to the 19th century. So what we're doing here is perpetuating that tradition so that those skills aren't lost.
I paint on a surface of mylar, which is this, using lithography inks, and then I produce an image. And these are covers for a book called 9 Figures.
We're going to take these top edges and fold them down to meet each other here in the center. Actually going to make the size of the hat. So I'll show you the traditional size like this. This, if you bring it all the way into the center, will make this size of a hat. If you bring it back just a little bit, you'll get yourself a little extra space. Yeah. All right. I would do maybe like half an inch. Okay. It is easier to do the folding if you go all the way to the center.
Well, about 12 years ago, I started working.
We're giving out these cards for grand opening. So very good.
Thank you.
I think every organization, probably every human being, goes through these sea changes or stages along life's way, or whatever you want to call it. And I think this is a really big one for Milkweed, going from a very prestigious nonprofit literary journal to a small press working out of Emily Buckwall's house, to an established national literary press doing 10 to 12 titles a year, and now to a press of even more national prominence in being in open book and expanding our publishing programs, which has been allowed a lot by being able to expand out an open book and have warehouse space. So
poetry, fiction, literature for children, and nonfiction for the world is home is what we are doing. We also have a program called eVerse, which is a way in which you can sign up on our Milkweed website and have a poem come to you every morning. It's a good way to start the week. These are not only from Milkweed, but from other participating literary presses. And so eVerse has become quite popular, and we have people subscribing from around the country to that. So in every possible way, we're working to get the good writing of the wonderful writers here in Minnesota and around the country out to readers.
I'm so glad we made that decision 3.5 years ago to get into this process and to be the publisher in open book. This building, along with all the other things that I've discussed, also for Milkweed's life offers us I think that next evolution in the press's life and future.
We've been great supporters of small presses like Milkweed and of the Loft since the beginning, and I think that our whole modus operandi is collaborating with literary organizations, being a mainstay for small presses. This enables us to firm that up all the more. This bookstore is half the size of the Grand Avenue store. The selection is geared toward the other tenants, so we have heavy on books, local authors, small presses, books by Minnesota authors, small fiction and poetry, creative nonfiction, not a lot of more scholarly or academic at this point. We'll be doing events. Hopefully, we're going to plan to do events, breakfast events, lunch events, after work events. The place is perfect for doing all sorts of events in the coffee shop, in the classrooms, in the performance space, and then we're going to be looking at how we can better serve the community here, and we'll find out as we go.
Kings need crowns to be the king, but me, I can be anything, any person, anywhere, if I just have my book and chair.
The what's next for Open Book is to really build a sense of community around the building. I think it will be easy for the Loft to draw students to the classes. Milkweed will operate as effectively here or more so than anywhere. MCBA has a totally new opportunity for a streetscape they didn't have before. But the real what's next for Open Book is about introducing, especially I think of the business community, to how literature ties to everything we do in our lives, including work.
This is a one-of-a-kind facility, and it feels wonderful to be here.
It's been a success. I think today is evidence that people care about this, and I've just been absolutely thrilled to be a background player in a very wonderful community effort.
Thanks to everybody in this community who's made this happen.
I'm Rachel Clark. I'm afraid of the dark, so please do not close this book on me.
Northern Lights, a look at Minnesota books and writers, is presented by the Minnesota Center for the Book, a program of the Minnesota Humanities Commission, with funding provided by Target Stores and the Elmer L. and Eleanor J. Anderson Foundation.